Wild Hearts is a very complex game with many things to tweak around and optimize. And even as a Monster Hunter veteran, there are many things about this game that I thought worked differently, and I just didn't know about this until I was over 50 hours into this game. As such, in today's video I'm going to be going over a lot of these things that I wish I knew when I started the game, and that have made my experience with Wild Hearts a whole lot better. Now let's start with something that I bet not a lot of people know about. Your healing water is of course the way you use to heal yourself in Wild Hearts. That being said, I see a lot of people sheathing their weapon before they actually drink the water. This is very likely a reflex from playing Monster Hunter, which admittedly I also did a lot at the start. You don't actually need to sheath your weapon, as by simply drinking the water is going to automatically sheath the weapon for you. That being said, the biggest thing about the healing water is that you can drink multiple doses of it at a time. So instead of drinking the water once, waiting for the animation to end and then drinking again, you can actually double tap or even triple tap the button on your D-pad, and you're going to take 2 or 3 sips of the healing water at once, and that is going to cut off just a little bit of time, but that can be the difference between life and death. After all, if you're healing, you are probably in not a very good shape. I never see people do this, so I assume that it isn't a very well-known thing. Now, another thing that is also very helpful and practical, but it also seems to be not very well known, is that you can actually animation cancel your moves with your Karakuri. Say you just finished a big swing, like the big finisher of the Karakuri staff. A Kemono is about to attack you and you want to get out of the way very quickly. Instead of waiting for the animation to finish and spamming the dodge button, you can simply just build a box, for example, and that is going to sheath your weapon and cancel the end-leg portion of the animation. So you're able to just sprint out of the way much quicker. You're also able to cancel in the middle of your heavy swings with some of these slower weapons. So if you're charging up your weapon and you see that the Kemono is going to attack you, you can very quickly build a spring and get out of the way very easily. Even some of the faster weapons like the katana or missing a parry with the bladed wakasa are going to leave you open for a very long time. So knowing about these tricks can also save you from danger very often. So keep this in mind when you're playing Wild Hearts, as it is actually going to be very useful once you start hunting mighty and even volatile Kemono. Now, something very important that happened to me, some of my friends, and I bet also happened to some of you, is that you're not actually unlocking every single Fusion Karakuri you should be unlocking. What I mean by this is when you go to the Karakuri skill tree and you see all of the unlocks that you have available at your disposal, you may notice the icons of Kemono that you have already hunted, but you didn't really unlock the Fusion Karakuri from their hunts. Well, what happened is, you're probably just doing too well on the hunt and you're not giving enough time for the Kemono to activate the condition that is required to trigger the moments of inspiration where time slows down, and you get this quick time event where you are able to learn and activate at the same time a new Fusion Karakuri. I, for example, had already hunted the Sunbreak Crow Kemono, which is the one you need to hunt to unlock the repeater crossbow, which I believe to be one of the very best Fusion Karakuri in the entire game, as it not only very often staggers the Kemono, but it also does consistent damage from a distance, so it is simply a very good tool to use at all times throughout the hunt. Another very important Fusion Karakuri that I had to look up that I didn't have unlocked was the Chain Trap Fusion Karakuri, which again I also believe to be incredibly useful. Of course, the best one in the game probably is the Harpoon, which you do unlock by just progressing through the story normally. It is a very consistent Fusion Karakuri that will always stagger the Kemono, and it also prevents Kemono from fleeing the area, so you're able to keep on relentlessly attacking them even when they try to leave, so you are able to complete hunts much faster and you can actually cheese a lot of encounters with this. But the point is, do yourself a favor and check on your Karakuri skill tree, see if there is a Fusion Karakuri that has not been unlocked, and in its place is the icon of a Kemono. If that's the case, then just go on that hunt, wait for the kimono to be enraged, and give it some time for it to trigger the condition to activate the moment of inspiration so that you unlock your fusion Karakuri. Now, while we are on the topic of Karakuri, I want to highlight some of the upgrades that you should try to prioritize as much as possible. In my opinion, the one you want to get the earliest as possible is the Tsukumo or Shrine. You can place down as many of these facilities as you can depending on your dragon pit, and what these will do is they will passively collect resources for you that you are able to receive once they are filled up. So what this means is that by having these placed on all of the different maps that you have available at your disposal, you simply interact with these at the start of the hunt, and you will no longer have to roam around the map aimlessly while looking for different upgrade materials that you didn't have before. And the ore shrines that you place at the start of the game are still going to be able to give you the materials that you need once you reach high rank in chapter 3 and 4, so again, it is a no-brainer that you prioritize this, as it is going to save you a lot of time when it comes to upgrading your armor sets and your weapons. And hey, even if you don't need those materials, at the very least you'll have some extra materials that you can sell for some extra gold. I would also say the same for the wildlife cage, which you can get a bit later on, as there are many upgrade progression paths that are locked behind materials that are somewhat hard to find and can actually be very easily farmed by using the wildlife cage. So again, place a couple of these on each of your maps and you're going to have a much better time. Of course, it's also important to upgrade your healing water, but at the same time it's not too essential if you're not having any difficulties with the game. Although I would say getting this spring extension can be extremely beneficial, as it is going to increase your invisibility frames whenever you use the spring, which already has plenty of them. So you'll be able to essentially dodge any incoming attacks by using this Karakuri. By the way, if these tips have been helpful and you didn't know about some of them, then please consider subscribing, as only 1% of the people that watch me are actually subscribed to the channel. Last time I did this, I saw a bunch of people mentioning that they weren't actually subscribed even though they thought they were, so do me a favor and check down below to see if you are actually subscribed, if nothing else, because I showed you something that you didn't know about. Thank you, and let's continue. Now, gold is not too hard to combine wild hearts. Of course, you have these special quests that you have to look out for, the small little coin icon, which means they're going to give you some special items whose only purpose is to be sold at the general store for some gold. That being said, once you get to the later stages of wild hearts, even though you can upgrade and refund the cost materials of the upgrades as much as you want, some of these upgrades actually cost a lot of gold. So having that surplus of materials to be able to sell can be quite a handy thing. Now, one thing I see especially very common at the start of the game, before people usually get to high rank, so around chapter 2 and 3, I see a lot of players not using their dragon Karakuri effectively. At the start, you won't have your dragon pits evolved, so you don't have a lot of leeway in things to add to your maps. That being said, the Flying Vine Karakuri, which I'm sure is one that most people love, just like myself, can be dismantled on both ends, which means that you can place the Flying Vine on one end, use it to get to your destination, and once you reach it, you simply dismantle the Flying Vine, and you're able to use it once again to keep traversing through the map. I highly recommend you do this, as you will unlock the different maps in Wild Hearts, as that is going to make exploration a whole lot more enjoyable. Once you do have your dragon pits upgraded, you can of course forgo of this technique, or I guess a little bit of an exploit, but it is something that I recommend you guys to do. Now, earlier I mentioned high rank and low rank. The thing is, in Wild Hearts, once you reach chapter 3, you will gain access to hunting the mighty kimono, which are essentially the high rank versions of monsters you have already hunted. They are more powerful, deal more damage, have more HP, and even have new moves. What this also means is that they have their own different armor sets that are much stronger than the ones that are available at the start of the game. So I would recommend you guys to not focus too much on farming armor sets when you are in chapter 1 and 2, wait until you get to chapter 3 and you unlock the mighty kimono, because those armor sets are going to outshadow the ones you've been using this whole time. That being said, don't feel bad about crafting weapons with these different materials and farming for them, because at the end of the day you can always refund the materials as I stated earlier, and moving along the different weapon trees to get the desired inherited skills is how you optimize your weapons in Wild Hearts, and having those materials is going to come in handy. Now, one very important thing that I do need to mention that I think a lot of players are overlooking is that elemental damage is very important in Wild Hearts, both in terms of damage that you deal against the kimono, but also damage that you take from the kimono. So if you find yourself going up against a lava bag, for example, it is going to be a terrible idea to go in with, say, -12 fire resistance. That being said, not all hope is lost if that's the case, because there are some foods that you can cook and dry that are going to increase your elemental resistances to certain specific elements. But more importantly, there is the fusion Karakuri called Elemental Lantern, which is going to greatly boost your elemental resistance. Now keep in mind that this fusion Karakuri does take a little bit of time to activate. Make sure that the lantern is actually placed down all the way, and that you actually get a elemental shield whenever you get hit. This thing is incredibly valuable and has saved me many times against not only mighty kimono, but against volatile kimono as well. There were some hunts where I went from getting 2 shot to actually being able to tank 4 hits. And I didn't change my armor set, it was all because of the elemental lantern. So do not sleep on this fusion Karakuri, especially if you're playing in multiplayer, where you can save more than one person with this. By now, most of you guys probably know that you get access to different moves whenever you perform a jumping attack from the boxes or whenever you dash from a spring. That being said, it is often overlooked that you get different combo extensions by using the stake, and some of these are incredibly powerful, like for example with the bow, so make sure that you try that around with the different weapons. Not all weapons have access to stake combo extensions, but the ones that do seem to be very powerful. And while the stake may not be the most conventional or easy to use basic Karakuri in a hunt, I want to go on record and say that you should probably always have stake on your loadouts, simply because the fusion Karakuri that you gain access to by having the stake are extremely powerful. Again, we're talking about the trap and the crossbow. Those two are incredibly powerful, and even though I may like other Karakuri individually more than the stake, I don't want to let go of these two fusion Karakuris because they are so good and fun to use. Also, one extra tip that may not be necessary to be mentioned for Monster Hunter players is that you don't need to be locked onto the monster at all times. In fact, depending on how fast or how big the monster is, I would argue that unlocking the camera is going to be much more beneficial to you. Personally, kimono like the lava bag or the final boss of the game became 10 times easier once I unlocked the camera. And these were some of the biggest tips that I wish I knew when I started playing Wild Hearts. I've made the mistake of not taking many of these things into account as I played through the game, so I've made this video to make your experience with Wild Hearts hopefully a bit better, and if that's the case, then consider subscribing to the channel. My name is Dark Hero, thank you all so much for watching, and as always, happy hunting!